Hi, I'm Oliver Cornely from the University in Cologne in Germany, and I'm an infectious diseases physician, this is the infectious diseases channel that I hope you will like and subscribe to at the end of the video. So today I want to just briefly present a talk that I will give these days. It's new antifungal agents, and I called it What's Close. So what is close? And actually I could expand this to not only what's close, but where can we use it? Where are the fits in the guidelines? Where might it really change clinical practice? So before I do so and share with you my thoughts on that topic, this is my conflicts of interest. We are involved in many of the clinical trials that are usually then designing the trials or helping to design the trials. It's always a team effort, of course. And we are always very pleased when we are asked to help with this, and that is why it's a long list. And then, of course, executing the trials as well, so enrolling our patients and offering the new drugs as early as possible to our patients. The guidelines that I will refer to during this talk are these from ESCMID and ECMM and ISHM and ASM, so that's and many other, and endorsed by many other societies. Ibrexafungerp is the first drug that I'd like to discuss with you. And it's an oral drug, and it belongs to the novel class of the triterpenoid glucan synthase inhibitors. Okay, so not easy, and I have said this a couple of times already in my life. So it's a mechanism that is very close, or the mechanism of the echinocandins. That is why people have said, oh, that's an oral echinocandin, which actually it is not. And you see that by the spectrum of activity, so which is besides Candida and Candida auris. There's a separate study on Candida auris that you could find on clinicaltrials.gov, for example, and Aspergillus. That is what you would expect. And maybe Pneumocystis you would expect from an echinocandin. You would certainly not expect activity in dimorphic or in other emerging fungi. And but there is a whole array. So it's not an oral candidin. But it is an oral drug that comes very close to the candidins because of the mode of action. And another reason where it splits from the echinocandins is in echinocandin resistant pathogens, Ibrexafungerp might still be active. So that is really a good news for us clinicians, I guess, once we have the drug at hand. So I jump over it because we will come back to it with the question, where does it fit? Okay. And another one that I'd like to briefly discuss is olorofim. And olorofim is, again, the first representative of a new class of antifungals, and it's the orotomide mechanism of action. So it selectively, potently inhibits the fungal enzyme dehydroorotate dehydroxygenase. And that enzyme is an enzyme you would find as an analog in the human cell as well, but there is a 2,000-fold difference in IC50 between the human and the fungal enzymes. So on that target, we don't expect adverse effects on the human cell. And the what it does, where this mechanism belongs, is in pyrimidine metabolism inhibition, and that, of course, is at the core of DNA and RNA synthesis, cell cycle regulation, and other aspects of cell wall and phospholipid synthesis. Number 3. Rezafungin, and I will share a few more slides with you on rezafungin, which formerly was known as CD101, so rezafungin, that indeed is an echinocandin, and it has been compared in a large phase 3 and in a somewhat smaller but decent phase 2 study before. And just a few highlights on that. Rezafungin was compared versus caspofungin, so which is certainly a well-known and well-established standard in candidemia and invasive candidiasis, in the so-called RESTORE study. And there was a multi-center, double-blind, large, well-designed, double-dummy randomized phase 3. And it was just published in January 2023 in The Lancet, George Thompson being the first author, and substantially contributing to the design and enrollment of patients into the study. So let's have a look at the phase 2 and phase 3 dosing and design, because this drug is special among the echinocandins. And the reason is that it has a very long half-life of way more than 100 hours. I found two different numbers, 120 and 144, but I mean, it tells you either way that you need to give this drug only once per week. And that is what has been done in the two studies. The phase 2 study has the acronym STRIVE, and then RESTORE, as just introduced, is the phase 3 study. Both were for candidemia and or patients with candidemia plus minus invasive candidiasis. So one can compare the designs of these because they are very, very close. And we can compare the results, and we'll come to that in a moment. So the design, the sketch on this slide, tells you that rezafungin is given on the first day with 400 milligram as infusion. And then a week later, you give 200 milligrams once weekly from there on. Well, actually, these two doses would be it for an uncomplicated candidemia, because they usually have like 14 days of treatment after the blood cultures become negative. So it would be 2 infusions, and that would be it, as opposed or as compared to caspofungin with, of course, daily infusions over these 2 weeks. And those patients who need longer treatment because either their blood cultures didn't turn negative that fast, so the bloodstream infection was ongoing for a couple of days before it then was successfully treated, that would be plus 14 days then, so it may add up to almost 3 weeks of treatment. And in the invasive candidiasis cases, it might be even longer, of course. You know that quite some of the deep organ tissues need longer treatment periods than candidemia, of course. So that's an interesting and difficult design, but once it's there, it's easy to understand, actually. And the paper is open access, so you can read it in full, or you drop me an email and we can share. So the primary endpoint is the cure rates at day 14. And here on this slide, we have the phase 2 and the phase 3 study results next to each other. And I'm thankful for the slide, which is actually a slide of Alex Soriano, who presented this, as you can see, at ECCMID 2022 in Lisbon. So the overall cure for rezafungin, which is the turquoise, and then the violet or purple color is for caspofungin here. On the phase 2 study, the overall cure was even a bit higher with rezafungin once weekly versus caspofungin standard dose. And in the phase 3, they were pretty much the same. The primary endpoint cure rates at day 14, that is. So certainly non-inferior versus caspofungin. So yes, we will have a new drug after all these years, a new antifungal that we can use for invasive candidiasis and candidemia. Here's another interesting point. I just selected those that I found most thrilling. And overall, I wanted to keep this introduction of the drugs short. So the mycological eradication at day 5 in the MITT population. And this time we have integrated analysis of the phase 2 and phase 3 results. And for the candidemia only versus those, or separated out the candidemia only patients. And we do see that there is an 80% eradication rate in the rezafungin arm versus a 68% eradication rate in the caspofungin arm. So apparently that is interesting, because if we would increase, with whatever drug, increase the mycological eradication at day 5, which is a critical day where you say, well, if it's still not eradicated, then it might be a complicated candidemia. But if we could increase that rate, that would be good news, of course. Maybe it is because of that front loading with 400 milligram. My take is that that's a dose that is chosen to really cover for the entire week. And before then, the second dose may or may not be necessary to treat whatever the disease in the given patient is. So, but it could be that we see an effect of if you give sort of a loading, that you have a more pronounced or better results, specifically in mycological eradication at day 5. This is a very old study, and there is no new drug in there. This is from 2007, and back then, of course, prosaconazole was new. I used that as a lead into the topic: where would these new drugs fit in the current standards, current guidelines, in what we do currently. So rezafungin might be a candidate here, because activity as an echinocandin expected against Candida aspergillus. We may even be able to prevent pneumocystis with rezafungin. There is an ongoing study. You can look that up in the usual registries of studies, but not published yet. So it's ongoing. And what we see here is allogeneic stem cell transplant recipients from the old study from Ullmann, which is standard ever since, and we use fluconazole before, and since the study we are more on the posaconazole side. Many centers are, and you see that these results, but they are well known, so I don't want to stay with this too long. If we could prophylax with rezafungin, so less oral medication, just once weekly IV rezafungin for patients who need prophylaxis, that would be highly interesting. And of course, I hope to see another study in AML patients, and there are other populations that one could imagine, but not all studies can be done at the same time, of course. If we have a closer look at candidemia management, then there are 2 drugs at least that could fit in on day 1, where we have the echinocandin right now, of course, the echinocandin, rezafungin, and then it could be fosmanogepix. I didn't really mention fosmanogepix, only grayed out on the overview slides with the 6 new drugs or so, because fosmanogepix is under development, and it's an absolutely promising drug. However, we don't yet have it's not that advanced that I could say or estimate when we will really have it in our hospitals. So, but it is active against Candida, and it could be that it might have potential for candidemia. We need to see that and need to see the clinical trial on that. Somewhat further down in the candidemia management, when you contemplate on, can we put the patient on oral drug? Let's say this patient is on an echinocandin, you now want to switch to oral, to fluconazole PO at the dose given here, which would be the case in many of these patients. Then there we may have another option, because it's somehow counterintuitive that you say, oh, this patient is doing really well under the echinocandin, cardiopulmonary stable, species is susceptible, the blood cultures are negative. Everybody's very happy with the course of that candidemia. And then what you usually do, you continue with the drug. But in candidemia, we say, oh, if everything's wonderful, then let's switch to another class, to fluconazole. So maybe the times where we switch to another class just because we are happy with the treatment interim result on day 4, 5, 7, all the way to day 11 or so, maybe we could stay at least within the same mechanism of action we could do now if we would use ibrexafungerp. It's not licensed for that, but that is where I see the potential. We need a clinical trial on it, and I guess that we will see a trial on this. Again, check out the registries to see what trial is running where. And in the United States, actually, the drug has already been licensed as Brexafemme for vulvovaginal candidiasis. So practically it's there and could be used. I don't know whether people do this in that off-label indication, which it currently would be. So let's switch to modes and the treatment options that we have in invasive aspergillosis. Currently, it's more or less 3 first-line treatment options that we have. It's isavuconazole, liposomal amphotericin B, and voriconazole, and that is just in alphabetical order. So whatever your favorite is, all 3 are licensed and reasonable choices. Mostly one would use an azole, I guess, but if a patient is, for example, on azole prophylaxis, mold-active azole prophylaxis, then you might not want to switch to isavuconazole or voriconazole, but you may want to switch then to liposomal amphotericin B if you think or show that there is a breakthrough. So for aspergillus, we have a whole range of drugs that we may be able to use in the future. Ibrexafungerp, yeah, it might be active because it's an echinocandid, so you could expect activity in the direction of aspergillosis. We will see aspergillus targeting drug, although it is much broader, as we will see on some of the next slides, because olorofim, well, I'll come back to that. Then rezafungin, of course. Fosmanogepix is another fit for aspergillosis. It looks like, so we need the clinical data now. And then somewhat more distant at the horizon is the gravitas compound, the former VL2397, which is now GR2397, and being developed for aspergillosis. So I said that I would come back to olorofim and discuss where else olorofim could go and could be of benefit. We do look now at the treatment pathway directly taken from the respective ECMM and other societies guideline treatment pathway for the antifungal management of lumentosporiosis. Lumentospora is a notoriously difficult to treat pathogen, and many of these patients are dead when the diagnosis is established. So we need new options here, and that is where we may see olorofim really making a change, apart from other scenarios, but certainly so lumentosporiosis, there is good news on the horizon. A very close relative, or at least from the clinician's standpoint, I think a taxonomist would now say that's not true, but for me, clinically very close and very similar situations where I'm confronted with scedosperm is another area where we can expect a change, where we can expect improvement, where we can expect to have choices in the future, and that's again olorofim. And fosmanogepix may play a role here as well, but the development of the drug is more advanced with olorofim versus fosmanogepix. That is why I say those that are almost there or expected very, very, very soon on the entire stretch of decades of drug development. These are in red, and the others are a bit softer in that orange color. Fusarium. There is information about fusariosis and drugs being used, and one of them is fosmanogepix, and that is thrilling because fusarium is a terrible pathogen, and many of us have seen patients die from fusariosis who were with a well-controlled leukemia and then succumbed to that fungal pathogen. And it's a whole family, of course, of pathogens. And and that is where we can expect that fosmanogepix might make a change once we have it. Well, if you want to see more of this and from the group, then you can always go to our YouTube channel where you currently likely are, ID in Motion, and please like it, the video if you liked it, and hit the respective button. And please, happy to see you on this channel again. So if you subscribe to it, we will let you know. Thank you very much.